Hi, Yana. How are you?
Hi, Jonah. I'm wonderful.
Welcome to Truth, Wisdom, and Freedom Conversations. I have here Yana Fry from
Mm.
Singapore, based in Singapore. So lovely to see you.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine.
Yeah, and so for those of you tuning in right now, feel free to comment where you're tuning in from. And this is really an open dialogue. And think of it as a casual conversation. So if there are any questions or um, things that come up, feel free to interact. So welcome everyone. Hello, Doreen. Doreen, you know Doreen.
I know Doreen. We spent 4 weeks together with Doreen.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
So as you're tuning in, and we'll give it a little bit for people to tune in, we're here to talk today about conscious leadership and about balancing the inner masculine and the inner feminine, what that means in relationship to the leader and what that is. And so before we begin and touch on that, I wanted to introduce Yana here. So Yana here is the founder of Awaken Human and also of Lakshmi House, that's based in Singapore, and also YanaTV. And she really helps conscious leaders and people who are considered role models and community creators, influencers, CEOs, sustainable entrepreneurs, these types of people, to align into mind, body, spirit. So we align together on the same wavelength because we work very similarly. And what I love about Yana is that, every time I look over at Yana, she's trying to get herself into the monastery. I'm like, Yana, like, where are you? Oh, I'm just trying to, get in with the Tibetan monks somewhere in Northeast India, or I'm hiding out in Bhutan. And there's this interesting dynamic that Yana has where she kind of straddles the world between the secular and the spiritual, and then navigating and negotiating that. And I feel like I do that also in different ways. And so we kind of run parallel journeys. So
Absolutely.
how I know Yana.
Yes. We are like brother and sister from different parents.
Yes. So welcome and thanks for joining, you guys. Hi, Trudy. So let's start first by talking about the leader, the archetype of the leader. Like, I see a leader as someone who influences, who has not just their personal interests, but the collective group interest at heart, and that they really want to make a shift that is beyond themselves. Right? And then so when we throw in the word conscious, then we have a conscious leader. So if we're in this path of conscious leadership, then we're talking about things that are a bit more symbolic. We're talking about emotional intelligence, how to lead from the heart, how to connect more to energy, right? With all of these things that are not very ordinary, right? So tell us a little bit about, how you work with, your leaders and the people that you coach, and what you see in terms of this theme that we're talking about today with the masculine and the feminine.
Great question, Jonathan. Well, first of all, I see actually quite a bit of change right now, what is happening in the world in the last probably 5 to 10 years, and especially in the last 3 months with everything that's going on. That what you said, like all those words and concepts, it was relatively difficult to introduce, especially to companies, right? If you talk about also conscious leadership, it's often to work with companies and people who are maybe more like traditional profession, and all these words we use were not very accepted. So, right, you can't use consciousness or compassion. You would have to use the word kindness, for example. So, right, but actually it's changing, and it's really wonderful. So I feel it is really changing, and people are getting more accepting of this, and it is much easier now to do the work. And so now when I talk to conscious leaders, actually I don't have to kind of change my language. Like the way how we are communicating, and probably not just the same when you work. Yeah. So with the way we're communicating, right, we can use this, we actually can talk about compassion, and we can talk about consciousness, and we can talk about energy and meditation. and people are okay with this, which is
amazing.
amazing.
It's so wild that, you know, you can't even use the word compassion in an organization or in the workplace, and you have to kind of, I want to say dumb it down, but kindness is not the same as compassion. But it is whittling it down so that it's more mainstream, right? But that's even wild that has to happen in the first place.
Yes, but now I feel we can. Now we can actually talk about compassion. And I also feel that there is a lot of change in people, particularly entrepreneurs who are running their own companies, because usually people who go for the entrepreneurship, it's a different type of personality. It is someone who, like, especially I think around our age, you know, it would be someone who really believes in making the difference and also, you know, changing something, changing the system, changing the structure. Like, I'm not saying that the current system is bad, but some elements are outdated and we have to change it, right? So when people come with businesses often and they try to change it, and those people are just more receptive to conscious leadership because they understand it's no longer like top down. It has to be more inclusive, and you need to inspire people, connect with your people and your team.
Right. Yeah, so well, let's talk about that. Systems. You brought up systems. And so systems, if we look at it, is really about structures and rules and protocol, and it's masculine, right? It's what we know, and it's what's traditional, and it's what's considered the norm. Right? And then if we look at some of these other qualities that we're talking about, compassion and heart-centeredness and this ability to tap into imagination and to using the more mysterious parts of ourselves, right? That would be considered the feminine. And so what do you feel like makes a good leader?
A balance between the two, 50-50. And that's, I know it's hard to achieve.
Great question.
I know, and it's even probably harder to maintain, actually.
Yeah, and why do you think that is? Why is it so hard to maintain this?
Yeah, because we live in a masculine world, and the business is masculine. It's kind of, it doesn't matter whether you're man or woman biologically, but the moment people go like in a business, it's a masculine energy. It's goal oriented. It's about results. It's about deadlines. It's about numbers. It's about structure and system and logic, right? Which is very masculine approach. And so when you come in with kind of a bit more heart-centeredness and compassion, it's often just gets kind of smashed by the system. So to me, for people to really, to be able to keep it after you found this balance, you either need to have a very strong inner alignment, like either practice, a coach or teacher or mentor who constantly helps you to go back when you go out of the balance, or we need the system to change. Or by the both.
Or both. How about both? Maybe incrementally, because sometimes it's like too much of a dose for people to have it all in one go. And you know, what's really interesting is that, like what you said, you don't necessarily have to be male to have feminine or masculine qualities about you, or female, and so on and so forth. But, you know, because we live in a very patriarchal society where it is heavily male, and imposing these masculine systems in the way that we run organizations, we also then find the imbalance in females. Females are embodying or trying to embody what they perceive as power or strength by trying to imitate what it means like to be a male, instead of tapping into their true power, their true masculine energy, which is not going to present or show itself in the way that a man would. And so, you know, I saw this a lot in Singapore, a lot with corporate professional women, where women were having these masculine imbalances because they were trying to play the role of a man instead of tapping into their inner masculine energy. So let's talk a little bit about what that means, because that might be confusing to some people, you know.
Yes, well, that's usually when that happens, what you describe, it's a disaster to relationship. Right? So because then I know
issues,
yes, exactly. I know exactly what you mean, and I have seen, you know, many women like that it's like overcompensation, because often female feels threatened. Like it's a woman, if you walk in on a board meeting and there are all other guys and you're the only woman, then most women would assume they have to act like men. It's exactly what you said, right? So it's a very masculine way of talking, masculine way of dressing up, it's masculine way of walking, even it's like the gestures, right? The nonverbal communication. which it's interesting when I work with clients who are men, and if we talk about this, maybe they have like a boss who is a woman and she acts overly masculine. For a man, it is really off-putting. You know, it's really hard to work with the woman like this because she kind of goes in a territory which is not hers. So on the contrary, if a woman is connected with her truly inner man inside of her, then there is no conflict. Then she shows up and she is confident, she is balanced, she is a clear communicator, she gets the stuff done, but at the same time, she remains a woman. And men actually they resonate and respect these women much more. It's much easier to work with the woman like this. So, yeah. And control issue, exactly. So women who try to overcompensate at work, it's always backfires in the relationship. So they would either be single or really struggle with their boyfriend or spouse.
Yeah. And then this also works the other way around, you know, where because men feel that they have to be presented in a certain way, how they're in the office. So it's all about tactics and logic, about numbers and how things get done. You know, my experience with working with men in that regard is that they feel like they're not able to express what they're feeling. So they're suppressing their inner feminine, which your inner feminine is very important because your inner feminine allows you to show gratitude and appreciation to your fellow coworkers. It allows you to express if you're vulnerable or if you need help. And if you're not able to express these simple things in your workplace, right, and that translates into your personal life, that's a lot of suppression going on, which then leads to an emotional explosion, right?
Exactly.
And so as conscious leaders, we really need to tap into all aspects of ourselves, not just, you know, playing up to perceived identities given to us by society. And I think that's another thing to touch on is identity.
Yes. And it also requires a lot of courage, right? I mean, for men particularly, I think for a woman to work on her inner masculine emotionally, it's probably a bit of easier than for a man. Because for in our society, it's kind of perceived as weakness. For a man to show inner feminine energy, it's not perceived as strength. Right? And so it requires a lot of courage from a man to actually look at it and be vulnerable and be okay with this. So identity.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about identity and how we wear identity like we wear clothes, right? We have all these different roles and archetypes that we play during the day. You know, when you're at home and you have your kids or your spouse, you're the caretaker, you're the nurturer, you're the parent, you're the provider. And then when you step into the workplace, now you're a boss, you're a colleague, you're a friend, right? And then you have to be a lover, then you're a son or a daughter or whatever. We play all of these different roles during the day, right? And we also then are attached to certain roles and identities and certain ways of being because we see certain identities as more desirable than others. So how is this a help or a hindrance to our growth?
The identity?
Yes, this identity aspect, because we need it, but then if we want it too much, it also is destructive. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell people what is important is to remain non-attached to your identity. It's exactly what you said. It's like a clothes that you wear. So you can choose a certain outfit and then you have to remove it. Like when you go to sleep, you go to sleep without any identity. So completely naked in your mind, right? And this is like the most beautiful rest. And then when you wake up in the morning, you tell yourself, okay, what identity I need to wear today? Because we need it. Otherwise, you can't function in the society. Like if you go outside and there is nothing, it's very difficult to create something in the material world. So we need identities. We need to be a teacher or a mother or a father or a business owner or speaker, right? Or something else.
Sure.
So, but then at the end of the day, you just remove all of that.
Well, even in the monastery. So let's talk a little bit about your time in the monastery.
Yeah, this is a great one. Yes.
Let's segue into that because identity is the crux of any spiritual search, right?
Yes.
And so if we look at all the successful companies out there, they're introducing spiritual work in the workplace. They might call it different things like mindfulness and all these things, right? If you look at Yahoo and Google and Nike and all these big companies, they're implementing meditative practices into their workplace, right? And they're all drawing from Eastern, wisdom, from the Buddhist traditions, predominantly through the art of meditation. So let's look at, the monastery, and let's look at how and your observations when you were, hanging out with the monks, and your experience with monks, and their relationship to identity.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's just like everything else in the society, right? I mean, it has its pluses and minuses, has benefits and limitations. And I think particularly being a monk it's a huge identity, because there are many things you cannot do. And there's also, like, from the way how you're supposed to look, right, to just how you're supposed to live your life, which is very interesting to observe. And I think that it's important maybe to some extent, like, you do this for whatever time you need to do this to realize what you need to realize. But then at the end of the day, as we always say, and I'm sure you know it, it's in any spiritual journey, you come to the point when you let go of all the systems, right? But you have to reach there. Like, at the beginning, you need the system and you need identity. Even spiritual seeker is an identity. People need it. And then you arrive somewhere, and this is it. Like my teacher, with whom I'm studying, it's an interesting example, because he kind of lives between society and monastery without belonging clearly to either one. Right? So he doesn't have any particular identity for this specific reason. So that it becomes also limiting if you just viewed as this particular person.
Yeah. And that explains, there's lots of transitions where a lot of people take the monastery calling, and then they go, and then they come back after 4 years, 8 years, or 10 years, and they reintegrate into society, because time is speeding up. Right? And we're not necessarily meant to have full lifetimes of a singular experience. We're meant to have diverse experiences in this biological experience that we're having, right? And if we're all on a path of consciousness, it's kind of like Joseph Campbell's, he has the 10 steps to the hero's journey, right? And so the first step of the hero's journey is that you're aware of the ordinary world, of what is known. And then you're sort of dissatisfied with it. So you decide to inquire and ask, what else is there? What else is beyond the known? And so you step out into the unknown, and that's when it gets really freaky or scary to some people, because then now there's the unknown aspect. But there's also this call to go out, because there's a desire for adventure and to seek. And so this is kind of the beginning of our seeking experience, right? And anyone who is a conscious leader, and they are on this path, right? And it's not a linear path, because we go up and down, we fall in, out, left, right. It doesn't, there's no right or wrong order to it, right? And then we cross these obstacles and these thresholds that test us, and then we eventually come to a place where we have to completely disintegrate. He calls this the dragon's lair. You can kind of think of it like Noah's, not Noah's Ark, but Jonah. Jonah and the whale, right?
Yes,
Jonah was given the assignment to go spread the gospel, right, in Nineveh. But then he said, no, I'm going to Italy. I'm going to go chill. I'm too old. So he got on a ship and went to Italy, and then there was a storm, so they threw him overboard, because they said, okay, someone's brought the wrath of God, and they threw him overboard. And then what happened was he got swallowed by a whale, and 3 days later the whale dropped him off in Nineveh, where destiny was calling, right? So there's a moment of like, we're disintegrating and we're becoming nothing, to then slowly reintegrate and come back home to the ordinary world with all of these new experiences from the unknown, the collective unconscious, which is, all the magical things we learn about ourselves, the inner feminine, about intuition, about visions, about symbols, synchronicity, all of these things, right? We carry that back with us. And I think that's kind of what's happening in the traditional world of business, that a lot of leaders are recognizing that there's so much more than the ordinary. So they're venturing off to do these very non-ordinary things, to alter their states of consciousness, to expand it so that they can bring all of that back in. And I think that is the dance between the sacred masculine and the feminine that we are constantly going through. And we do it over and over and over again.
Yes, absolutely. I can also say it has been my personal journey, exactly what you described. So that for many years I went on this, but exactly what you said, and the monasteries and seeking and trying to figure out. And after spending, and I'm just blessed that I had an opportunity, and I'm still have this opportunity to spend so much time with Tibetan lamas and monks, right? And it's just amazing to just learn and watch their way of living and teachings. And one of the biggest realization is they pretty much sent me back from the monastery into the world.
I remember us talking about this. You're like,
exactly.
I'm like, Lana, Yana, that's my dog. Yana, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be in a monastery? You're like, no, they kicked me out.
Yes. So because there's the whole biggest realization is there's no separation, right? I mean, you go to the monastery and it's the same thing in the society. So you study, but then there are also practicalities of life. You know, monks need money, nuns need money. I mean, you know, you need to invest in the monastery. You know, it's allowed support. So it's still kind of, you can't divorce physical and metaphysical. And what also happens often with people when they start going in those spiritual journeys and expansions, especially at the very beginning of it, when they're not very familiar with this, then people go, money, who cares? Family, who cares? Children, right. Who cares? Right? So,
it almost becomes very selfish in the pursuit of enlightenment.
Exactly. It becomes very selfish, and also people often kind of in a denial and run away from their current life problems into the ashram or monastery or mountain. Life doesn't work like this. I mean, you still have to come back.
Well, I've definitely run away to the ashram to hide, right? And it's kind of like when people have a travel bug, it's very similar. People don't have these ashram or monastery experiences. It's very similar to when you have a travel bug and you realize that all the travel that you're doing is you're actually just running from yourself.
Exactly. So you can't run away from yourself. You have to, and you know, so I feel that those who do this, it is the difference is that they just receive enough tools and techniques at the monasteries, maybe at the ashram or with the right teacher, right? To go back and clean the mess. And this is what everyone has to do eventually.
And this really plays out in our relationships, all relationships, so relationships with our family, with our loved ones, with our children, with also our colleagues and people at work. And I see relationships, most people think of it just as romantic. I see relationships as all relationships in our life. It's the connection that we have with other human beings. And so if we don't have that relationship with ourself anchored in alignment, truth, wisdom, and freedom, then all of that's just gonna explode in our faces in various ways, right? In your business.
Absolutely.
It's interconnected. And so that kind of leads us into the patterns of like belief systems and sabotage that we tend to, as human beings, come against. So what are some of the cultural or generational belief systems that you see that people have installed as programs that keep them from fully coming into balance as a person and also as a leader?
Wow, great question, John. So this is so much, I don't know where to start.
You know me, I just love easy questions.
Exactly. I'm like, well, what area of life? What are we talking about? Personal development, money, relationship, life, career, purpose, right? I mean, it varies. To me, it's very, I mean, there are like general beliefs that limit people. And there are also specific to different area. So what are some of
the main ones that come up when it comes to, you know, leading a community of people, right? Some of them, I have some ideas.
You have some ideas. Okay. Well, I know that for a lot of people, there are beliefs about abundance. So because people who often go into the community leadership, it's often money somehow becomes quite elusive, and they often put purpose like first, which is wonderful. But then if we start talking to them, what goes behind the closed doors, a lot of like social, especially projects, they really struggle to make their ends meet, you know, and pay the bills.
Because there's belief systems around money that money is, they don't deserve it, it's evil.
All kind of stuff. Yeah, it's money. Yeah, money is evil, money is dirty, right? I mean, money is, they don't enough, or there's not enough money, or very common is like men control money. You know, women often say this, which is really interesting. Then like there are beliefs about potential, like people just don't believe that they are worthy enough or they can, right? So if you actually kind of distill it, then often it comes to just feeling that not worthy enough or not able to do something, or another common one is, why bother when there's already so much in this industry? It's like, why open another business or write another book when there is so much shared in this field, right? I mean, this is like also another one.
That goes back into the whole masculine imbalance, because money to me is a masculine embodiment of that energetic exchange of appreciation. Like that's what money is to me. And so because we have these inner masculine wounds, right, of course then we're going to also have these wounds and limiting perspectives around what money is and what it can do, right? And so would you say then, like, most of our work is in neutralizing these belief systems?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I always say that. I mean, first the way how I do this, I ask people to identify what prevents them from, what is the limiting beliefs, what you say, and then we kind of rephrase them into the empowering ones, and then the next step would be completely reset it back to zero. Right? So because you don't also really want to be limited to neither plus nor minus. Yeah. But yes, it's a lot about, it's like rewiring the brain, creating new neural pathways. So new ways of looking. And I know you're also really good at that. So to just opening eyes people to different way of thinking and kind of perceiving what the life actually is and how they can do things. Yeah.
So we have so we have money as one of these masculine obstacles that people have. And then what's a feminine kind of imbalance that you see a lot in male and females?
Let me see. If for conscious leaders, right, feminine imbalance, I would say lack of vulnerability, like fear of vulnerability, particularly public vulnerability. Like what I often see, because to be a conscious leader, how I understand it, and please correct me if you have a different understanding, right? So from my understanding, it's a person who actually is okay to be in the public eye, because it's part of the conscious leadership, right? I mean, in traditional leadership, you can just sit behind your desk, someone else does your job, and you just sign papers, and this is it. So, in a conscious leadership, you actually have to go there, and you have to speak your truth and stand in your truth in the public eye, which requires a lot of courage. But also, in order to connect with people when you go public, what you talked about relationship, you have to be publicly vulnerable. And I don't mean you have to cry every time you give your speech. I mean, some people do, but it's not necessarily this kind of vulnerability. It's just being okay to talk about what is important to you and show your real self with no mask, right? So when you kind of no filters, you just who you are for real. And I feel that because it requires this softness in your heart to do this, which for men, it's often threatening, because again, it's this masculine identity when they assume that their peers will perceive them as weak if they do this publicly. And for women, it is threatening because they assume that society is going to reject them and think that they just like crybabies or something along those lines, and not take them seriously, right? So the women want to be taken seriously, and sometimes they just perceive it limits them from even though in my experience it's exactly the opposite actually.
And I think that this, and I totally agree with you. And I think that another way to, there's also a limiting belief on how we view what vulnerability is. I think the word itself is so overused, and people equate it to emoting, crying or extreme emotions, right? And so then it kind of frightens some people. But if we kind of look at vulnerability as more of honesty, and the ability or the courage to be able to show appreciation, that's very vulnerable. Right? Because to give gratitude is being vulnerable, because that's you letting your walls down to say, hey, I appreciate your time for doing something. Thank you so much for helping me. Because now you're admitting that someone has helped you and that you appreciate them for that. And because in the masculine business world of, the patriarchal paradigm, this isn't something that's taught, right? Because it's all about competition, which again is another imbalance of the masculine. And so you don't want to thank your potential competitors, right? Everyone's out to get you. And so if we continue to have this viewpoint on life, then what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen?
Well, I think it's what's happening right now. we're kind of witnessing it. We are all just staying home, kind of in a way. And the world, as we know, is falling apart, which is, I mean, for me, it's beautiful to watch just this new world that is being born. And I feel systems are changing. And I can even see it like talking to, business people, to conscious leaders during this time. It's interesting to see even traditional ones, like those who are not into this kind of work and stuff, that people don't want to go back to how things were before. Like everyone actually wants to change. And so I feel that it's whatever we have done as a society on a collective level brought us to where we are right now. Which was not functional on many levels for many people and nature and other parts of our life. So I feel that it's time for us to create new beliefs, new structures, to bring more feminine into this masculine structure, right, on the collective level, and see what this is going to create for us. So that would be interesting to see.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Bringing some more feminine into the masculine, and seeing what that creates. So let's talk about some practical things that people can do, some practical spiritual tools or practices that people can do. What are your top 3 go-to spiritual tools that you use on a daily basis to stay aligned?
Okay, so number 1, I have my own spiritual practice. So I think the practical tool is for each person, you kind of, it's good if you figure out for yourself or find what it is. And then you just stay with this, because the commitment is very important. So for those who are watching us, if they don't have any particular practice or teacher, right? So they don't belong anywhere in specifically, then I think that any meditation is a great one. And under meditation, I just find when you just stay quietly with yourself and focus on your breath for 10 minutes a day, right? So this is like a great start to just be present here and now. It kind of centers you. And then the other one, and just what you said, the gratitude is huge. So to just be grateful in any situation. And also I know that again now during this time, people have all kind of reactions to what is happening in the world. But no matter what is going on, even if the life is falling apart, there is always something to be grateful about.
Sure.
So I feel that, right, the daily gratitude for just that you have life, you have body, you woke up every morning and you're alive, right? To me, this is like a huge, huge gratitude. And also I feel, because we talk about alignment, mind, body, and spirit, right? So it's almost like, I guess for the mind, you could do some breathing, which helps. So for the spirit, it's the gratitude, the element of that. And for the body, I personally love yoga out of all other kind of ways of doing physical exercises. So because it also helps it to balance. And now there is just so much offering like online that even if you don't know, there are so many teachers who offer this. So I do yoga very regularly. And this I feel helps because then it's on all levels, it's balanced, right? The mind is aligned, the heart is in the right place, this connection with the soul, and the body is also healthy, which is very important. It also creates this space and balance.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll add a 4th thing to that: nutrition, because that's part of the part of the food aspect.
Yes.
If you're eating a diet full of grains and glutens and a lot of sugars and processed food, that's gonna cultivate more fear, actually. Nutrition is biological beings, right? So the biology of fear is induced from all of these gut inflammations that are caused by these types of foods. And so the kind of food that you're putting in is going to be a reflection of your inner world as well, right? And how quickly you react or not react, and how you transition. And so we have to look at everything from an interconnected lens, like what you said, mind, body, and spirit. And I think that these are across the board. I think people who are, really committed to staying aligned in their truth, in their wisdom, in their freedom, they make sure that they have these pillars set in place. And it's not just like a thing that you do every now and again when you need to feel better, right?
Yes.
You can, right? You definitely can use it to help you feel
yes.
better temporarily, but then it's like, that's not really the point. The point is to
Yes.
cultivate an ongoing state of elevated consciousness.
I love it. And the word also you used, cultivate the, what is it? The ongoing elevated state of consciousness, right? This is a very good expression. And it actually also, I feel, perfect for conscious leadership, particularly because conscious leader is the person who leads others, right? It's a person who is in service to others. So you can truly lead other people only when you yourself are grounded, balanced, and aligned. And from what I have seen and worked with people, unless you have like a regular routine that helps you to go back to the state over and over and over every day, no matter what's going on, you can't fully lead people. Sure. So you know, right? So that's why it's so important what you said, to make it regular practice.
Yeah. And I think I also want to take, how we've been expanding concepts. I also want to like zero in on, the term conscious leader, because conscious leaders are also people that are like parents. Parents are, those are conscious leaders. If you have a family unit where you're teaching them values and belief systems. And so all the rules of leadership apply to the smaller units as well. The way that you behave with your friends, the way that you help your friends and support them in times of difficulty. You're in a leadership role. We're all being asked in times of crisis to connect to our inner leader. Whether that is in a professional business sense or in a personal front, it's all the same, really. And that's something that people really need to understand. Is like how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So the way that you treat your family and your kids and your friends and is the way you're going to be in your business and as a leader to your community, right? So you have to have all of it, in alignment. Otherwise, the tower will fall or whatever, the Jenga thing.
Yes, absolutely. It's great point also about parenting and children. And I also see this very often. And I think, again, particularly now when there are so many kids at home, right? So parents just go crazy as much as children do probably. So that's why it's important to for everyone, guys, it's really important to have your daily routine, whatever it is for you, right? So, but what we said, nutrition. So there has to be an element of food. There has to be an element of the physical exercise, right? Whatever it is. There has to be an element of meditation of some sort for the mind, and some kind of gratitude practice or compassion practice that just helps you just to be in your heart grounded. So I feel if people do just that, it really creates this space then to be okay with everyone else around you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, if people are finding it difficult to do those things, there's other forces at play that are doing that are, right? So that's when you need a guide or you need a mentor to help you with that. Like we all have mentors and teachers in our lives that have helped us and to mirror out or to bring out rather the truth that is within each of us, right? The inner teacher within you, the inner teacher within me, and that's we're meant to do things as a community. We're meant to do things with each other and not do this alone. So I think that's another important thing to highlight, is that to not just give a list of things to people like, okay, now go do it by yourself. It's like, no, go find people to connect with to do these things together. It's not a solo journey.
No, absolutely. I'm a personal believer. Like I always kind of advocate for working with mentor, with coach, with teacher. Right? I have my own teachers, and so I feel it actually makes a huge difference. And all the people that I know who really kind of become conscious leaders on a larger scale, right? So they all have someone else they're working with. So while they're leading all these masses of people, so they always would have a mentor, coach, or a teacher who helps them to stay grounded, committed, and their truth, healthy, physically, mentally, and emotionally, right? Those things are very, very important. And also, like what I see right now, is what you said, it's the collective effort where it's good maybe to spend some time to start building a different community, to start attracting different people now in your life who want the same things you do. So, and then there is this community support around everyone, which is also helps.
Yes, community support. I love that. Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for sharing all of this with us and for joining us on this
You're
Truth,
most
Wisdom, and
welcome.
Freedom conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we close for the evening?
Well, I just think what you're doing is amazing, Johnson. Let me tell everyone about Johnson what I want to share. Johnson is amazing. I love those conversations. I love that you do this. I think it's really, really beneficial for people. And just for everyone else, that let's all arrive into our full potential together, and then see how the world's gonna look like when that happens.
Yes.
Let's do it, people. It's time.
Yes, it is time. Well, thank you so much for sharing your message and for standing in your truth always, and for being so clear and so passionate and loving in everything that you do. So I really appreciate you, and I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future.
Yes, I would absolutely love it, Johnson. I would. Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks, Yana. Have a good night.
Thank you. Yes, bye.
Bye.